Oana Nasui from Formare Culturala. I'm very glad we got to together here on we believe very important topic. I will just make a very brief intro, and then I will leave to Niels Righolt to facilitate further on. We have been working along, it's a year already now, within this project Nordic Insights, and we tried to gather information, pick the brain of different experts through the means of this type of instruments, roundtable, everything online. Roundtables, knowledge transfer interviews, also internal meetings, but still working on a study book. It will be a digital one, but also print on demand, and also an action plan. So all this knowledge that we have gathered to be put at use in so many different forms. So for this session, we have Jonas Dahlberg, it's OP Lab there, you can find him, artist and professor, and Laura Panait, anthropologist and a community facilitator, and they will briefly introduce us to their practice and theory, but I will also ask Niels maybe to give us a bit of introduction within his realm, his field. So yeah, thank you very much, and please, Niels, thank you.
Thank you very much, Oana. So lovely to see you all. Very, very glad to be back on screen with you in Romania. I am Niels Righolt. I'm the director of the Danish Centre for Arts and Interculture based in Copenhagen. And we work in the intersection, you could say, between the artists, the cultural institutions and operators, the formation of culture policy and social design. And my role here today is mainly the role of being the facilitator, but I will just give you a very, very short fly into the topic of the day and some of the different angles that we will touch upon. I will also very much urge you to please don't hold back on your questions or comments or remarks. You're more than welcome to give your perspective and to raise questions to today's two keynote speakers or presenters that we have with us. And I would very much also like you, if you're not comfortable with the English, you can write your question or your comment in Romanian in the chat, and then Oana will share it with the rest of us who unfortunately doesn't speak Romanian, and then we can have a conversation. So please contribute as much as you can. Let's do this together. It's a safe space for unsafe thinking, you could say, around the role and the design of art in public spaces. What does that really mean? Where are we when we talk about, you know, what could be the potential conflicts that we face when we talk about art in public spaces? What are the transitions that we can see up here in the Nordics? From a Nordic perspective, from a Danish-Swedish perspective, right now, I'm Danish, I'm working in Denmark, but I'm sitting at home, and I'm sitting at home in Sweden. So in both our countries, in Denmark and Sweden, you could say that there's been a shift on how we approach and contemplate and participate and act in social spaces over the last 2-3 decades. And that's interesting. It's interesting from many, many different aspects. It's interesting from the aspect of participation. It's interesting from the aspect of social design. It's interesting from the aspect of what does a public space mean? How do we inhabit them? How do we interact in them? How do we navigate them? To what extent is art being part of that process, being included in that process, or maybe even stimulating that process or provoking that process? So we're having a lot of conversations across the countries basically on transitions and transformations that we can see in urban design, in societal design, in rural design even, where the relationship between art and its immediate surroundings are being reframed, readdressed, but also discussed. And it's interesting to see that the roles of the initiators are shifting, that there are basically more people taking part in the conversation that there would normally have been just 30 years ago. And that in a way also kind of creates a necessity of rethinking and redefining the framework that we are talking about. So I'm very, very happy that we have this third roundtable, and today we have two presenters with us. And the presenter who's out first, the two presenters that we have with us today are two very experienced presenters from the side of curation and artistic intervention. It's from Sweden. It's Jonas Dahlberg. He's an artist based in Stockholm. I will give a short intro to Jonas just in a second. And the other presenter that will come afterwards is Laura Panait. She has a very long experience in urban anthropology, community development, and public space interventions. Laura has worked with please forgive my Romanian here, Terenuri Spațiu Comun in Monașturi in Romania, and she has working a lot in Cluj, working with in the public park, the creation and framework of a public park in Cluj. And Lala will later on extend her interpretation and her experience from doing that. Jonas, who will be out first, is, as I said, an artist based in Stockholm. He's a professor at the Royal Institute of Art in Stockholm, and he's the founding director of an interdisciplinary studio called Of Public Interest, or OPI. Jonas is known for his, among other things, his winning proposals for the memorials of the victims of the terrorist attacks in Oslo and Utøya on July 22nd, 2011. But he's also quite famous in a Swedish Nordic context for a whole series of exploration initiatives about what is actually the role of art, and what is the productive role of art, and what's the role of the artist, and how can we facilitate the role of the artist in the interaction and the engagement and the encounter with a local community or the local citizens or the people around a given space. So without further ado, Jonas, I really look forward to your presentation. You're so welcome on board. And I will, again, just encourage you all to listen and raise your questions afterward. Jonas, please, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me all? And if
Yes.
you're not completely uncomfortable, you feel free also to put on your camera. It's always nicer to see. Maybe it's already been mentioned before, so then it's the uncomfortable people that have and that's of course okay. But it's always nicer to see who one is speaking to and with. Also, since we are a round table, and I hope that it will be a fairly informal talk where we can jump in and ask questions during the time also, and so on. So feel free to interrupt and throw in a question and so on. Also for Niels and for Oana and Laura and so on. So you can also we create some kind of conversation here. Yeah, as Niels said, I'm a visual artist and professor. I have also a background in architecture that I studied a couple of years before, that I stopped with and then applied to an art academy. And for many years I showed mostly or almost exclusively in biennials and galleries and museums and so on around the world, and a series of video works, but got tired of that after a while, and it felt I was really... What can one say? You start to question what it means to just speak with a group of people that are mostly agreeing with you, because it's a quite homogeneous group of people that goes to museums and galleries and so on. So I started to be increasingly more interested in starting to work outside those institutional settings, and to kind of get closer to be political, really political, and not just as an outside commentator, one can say. even if that is sort of maybe a bit naive to think that one can be as an artist but I allow myself to think or to be that naive a little bit. Today I will share mostly about the platform I've started, which is called Of Public Interest, and some thoughts around how we work around in our shared living environment. I try to not say public space so much or public sphere, and try to talk around it in a different way, because it's very hard today to know what's public and not, and what does it mean to be public and so on. So it's better to talk about it as some kind of, or for me at least, some kind of environments which we share and have some kind of access to, since also the public spaces are not clearly public anymore in that sense, or one can also question who is the public and so on, or which publics and so on. I will start to Niels mentioned the memorials. I think I will take a little starting point there just to show and talk very briefly around it, and because it's the sort of the reason for why I'm here and speaking with you today, that changed my whole practice and sort of took me from being a video artist and to be a kind of a professor in then art in the public sphere and doing different kinds of works. But I will try to share my screen first here, and we will see if we can make that work as a start. Can you see me now, or you can see the presentation?
Absolutely, it works super.
Yeah, great. I can't see any of you now, so it works not so super for me. So if any one of you raise, but I see my own presentation. I wonder if I maybe can. Maybe I shouldn't jinx it. And we.
You know what, Jonas? I will just keep you alert if anything happens with this.
Perfect. And I will read a little bit sometimes, so excuse if it becomes a little bit stiff, and also maybe someone can also. I said yes, or when we talked, us that are giving the talk or that are speaking today, I said that I will be very brief. And I realize now that I have already talked longer than I thought in just by chatting in the beginning. So maybe someone can let me know if I'm talking way too much.
Absolutely, but take your time. We have time, so please take your time.
Yeah, so in 2014, I won the international competition for the creation of the memorials to commemorate the victims of the 2011 terror attack in Oslo and Utøya. So what we see here is that we see it was two memorials that were sort of connected, one in Oslo in the governmental quarters, that's the one on the right, and one at Utøya or at the peninsula reaching out in the water towards Utøya, which is the two images to the left side. And the image, the one towards Utøya, which was a starting point in my process then, is a very one can say a simple piece that takes the starting point from trying to maybe that's too long to go into, but it's a cut in the peninsula that takes the viewers or the visitors down into a small room inside the rock, which you see there in between in the cut, and interrupt the view towards you can't see out on Utøya. You will never get that view on the island. It blocks the sort of a little bit sort of voyeuristic view towards the island, where one tend to look at it as the evil incarnate, or it becomes a little bit voyeuristic, and it sort of forces you to look inside yourself instead, and through your own loss, and meet the loss of what happened there through your own loss, one can say. The rock that I take away from that peninsula and sort of split the peninsula. I moved then to the governmental quarters, and there I make 2,000 stone slabs from the stone of the rock there, and in these rocks, in these stone slabs, are all the names of the people who lived in Norway that day, the 22nd of July 2011. They are engraved into that those stone slabs, and they together form a big public square. And the top image you see there is with one of the names that has a little bit more air around it, like a breath. That's one of the names of the one that lost their lives. So it's a memorial that sort of where living and the dead share space together, and it becomes, one can say that it's the responsibility is put on the living to tell the story about what happened that day, because it creates some sort of oral storytelling where when people come to me, maybe from the beginning they come themselves to look for names of relatives or for family members and so on that they have there, and through the search for their own place in the world they then see these names of the ones that lost their lives that day. And then it changes the reading of the place, it changes the reading of everything there in that sense, and it changes your place in the world, and it changes your responsibility to what happened there in that sense during that day. But that's a very brief description of the work, and not the best one I can do, but it's to just like give you an idea about the work. And then I won the competition for this, but it was never realized after a small group of residents near the proposed memorial site of Utøya sued the government. They were led by a local politician representing the same party that the terrorists were part of during his adult life. Subsequently, politicians responded by cancelling the project just 1 month before construction was set to begin, and after 4 years of work. In its aftermath, I had to contend with the complexities of public mourning, private motivation, media and government and institutional oversight. And all these questions that came to me after this, and all this work I put into this work, prompted me, one can say, to start of public interest. So public interest, or OPI, is a platform operating across art, architecture and beyond, structured around 2 distinct components. OPI Lab, which is a research environment and advanced course at the Royal Institute of Art in Stockholm. I run that together, the research part and the educational part, together with my colleague, curator and writer Jasmine Hinks. And OPI X, a studio environment dedicated to initiating, supporting and developing projects. Central for OPI Lab, or central for OPI is our interest in our shared living environment and in navigating how to initiate, realize project where imagination meets critical thought, and a genuine interest in how one's practice meets a place, its context, its histories and its publics. So what is of public interest is not a specific agenda, but rather the insistence that our living environments are places where a polyphony of voices and often conflicting interest should be able to coexist. This often requires moving beyond existing frameworks, sometimes working critically within them, and at other times by negotiating values, that could be spatial, architectural, sculptural, conceptual, political, and more, that are overlooked, unasked for, or even unwanted. Of public interest is located in a storefront. You see where OPI is in the bottom there, so you see the yellow house there. It's located in a storefront in the residential part of Gröndal in Stockholm. This neighborhood, together with a zoning plan aimed at transforming the industrial area on the nearby waterfront into housing, forms a context and a case study that functions as a container for experimentation and exploration for different interests, professional knowledge, creative approaches, and skills. The storefront is where OPI Lab and OPI X works. But it also acts as a form of spatial publication, a public location, for testing, developing, and experimenting with multifaceted artistic languages prototyped at a scale 1:1. Through initiating spatial, architectural, sculptural, conceptual interventions, performative interactions, and more, the neighborhood itself becomes our atelier. Its publics, contexts, and actors are conversation partners. This locality and its proximity to different publics form a foundation for developing methodologies and projects in relation to place, applicable for future projects, methods, and practices elsewhere beyond this specific location. So, how do we then work, or how can one say that our starting point in our methodology when we work in this sort of complex setting is something we call the pinball method, or I have come to work out something that I call a pinball method. It is an attempt to describe and make a tool for subjective, multidisciplinary. I was presented interdisciplinary before, but I make a point of then saying that I rather see us as multidisciplinary, that we are many different disciplines that are meeting together and keep our knowledge, and we are not striving to work as if we were one. We're striving to add layers to each other's disciplines. The pinball method is an attempt to describe and make a tool for subjective, multidisciplinary concept and project development. It is not a script or an objective mapping and gathering of information. It is a work methodology about how to develop projects situated in the complex context that is called public space. It's a methodology which is built like a continuous critical dialogue, reading, understanding, and debugging of a project. The project development is behaving similar to a ball in a pinball machine, where the ball is constantly bumping back and forth between things that forces the player to adapt, adjust, and respond. In this pinball method, the project develops through continuously bumping between where, how, why, who, and what. And with an outside layer that you can't see here now, which we call the distribution layer, but it's too much to go into here. It is not a linear process. It follows the logic of the ball and its constant process of listening, speaking, responding, and adjusting. The ball needs to be set in motion to start the game. The ball represents the first initial curiosity or interest, no matter what it is. A thought, a feeling, a material, a political interest, and so on. To be able to start the process of developing a project, you need to put the ball in play directly, so it starts to respond to the very specific situation and locality that you are in. If a project and a concept is developed too far before starting to play, it will most likely fail or not reach its potential, since the project will not be able to adapt, respond, and adjust if the concept already is fixed. It is like speaking with someone without listening and thinking about who they are, just saying things out loud and speaking and taking space. So the ball go back and forth against the bumpers, what, where, how, who, and why, and slowly develops the thinking, rethinking, testing, sketching in and outside here. But it's like what one can say, it's like now I wish I could see the people on the screen and to see if it's any question around this, but it's a way of, one can say that it's a method as a certain kind of listening practice, where instead of seeing these many of these factors that you put into that one changed the palette. The palette becomes everything which is a place. Everything that contains the situation you work with becomes the material that you work with, that builds up the project, one can say. So that is how we try to work, and which I think it's maybe the only way you can work if you want to do complex work inside a situation where it's very hard to initiate projects which are experimental or where they need maneuver space in certain way. And therefore it's also why we talk about this multidisciplinary way. I believe it's almost impossible to do this alone. It's so complex to go into this with different actors, so many interests, so many different things to consider, and do it alone. So you need to be many people together to be able to develop it. So here I will talk through a few of the things that we then talk around in regarding works or what we do in the lab. A few of these, we have a few words which we are using, a few methodologies. And Niels, you feel free to jump in and we talk through a few of these. So if it's anything you need to or you want to pop in a question, feel free to do that now also.
Yeah, but absolutely. But if you just jump back one slide before you go into this one, go back to, yeah, exactly. Because I think what's really interesting is when you look at the 4WH, the where, the what, the who, the why, and then how those kind of form the direction of the pinball into a much more, in my interpretation of it, a much more cautious and also well anchored how. There is some kind of intuition, isn't there? There isn't a way, you said yourself that it's very much about listening, basically practicing a listening behavior in the formation of that how. Can you just elaborate a bit more on how you actually do it? How do you steer the pinball?
Yeah, well, I don't think one can say like that. It's like a critical reading in a way, you know. Yeah. So it means that one throw in, if I would take how I developed, maybe I can do that. If I take how I developed the memorial in a way, and you come to different, the idea with the memorial, for example, was I have a very simple idea from the beginning, a very, very simple idea. When we come, my starting point was that I thought that the gaze towards Utøya Island was not a good gaze. It was a passive voyeuristic gaze, and I wanted to stop it. So that is what was my initial starting point with that. That was my pinball that I threw in. So then it means, so then I throw in that, and then I start with, so how can I, how do I do that? How do I stop the gaze? So I started to, have a wall in front. I started to block it. I started to block the view. I started to do out in the water. I started to do many things, And then, but none of it worked because it's for reasons around in this, that it became the monument. It didn't do the, if you follow, it didn't do the things. It was not operative in the way it should be operative. It becomes something different. So you just keep on bouncing it, and you keep on testing and sketching and again, this is sort of till you're able to take the next sort of step to it bounces towards something else. And it first started to bounce when it started to get operative was when I started to make when I came to the point of the cut. And when I came to the point of cutting that I take down the viewer so you can't see, then it means that in that case, it means that then I need to stop. because it's no reason for me to keep on developing that project if I don't know if it's possible to do it. So directly there I go out to sort of a how and maintenance and risks and budget and so on. So then I started to call a lot of people up, basically, like rock specialists, different kinds of whatever it is, and to make sure that this was possible to do inside the budget like that. And so when I've secured that, then you start to bounce, you keep on bouncing, when you have secured that, then and the project keeps on developing. The reason why I reached the cut from the beginning was that I had when we were on the site visit, it was a dinner in relation to that site visit, and I was standing outside outside that restaurant, and one of the victims' support group was there. One of the victims' families was there, and he came to me and said, "Jonas, remember that it can hurt. You don't need to do anything that is harmonic or beautiful in that sense. It can hurt. It can be painful, So that was part of my pinballing also, that voice that gave me the blessing to do something which was kind of going outside what maybe I would have the guts to do without that. So it means that you take in all these different factors and you keep on developing, but you throw something in. What you throw in from the beginning needs to be so abstract. It needs to be like a driver, something that can take a project, a simple idea like, okay, the gaze is bad, let's stop it and let's see what that brings me to. And I come in as a video artist and came out as a kind of a landscape just by following that driver of stopping the gaze and bouncing around these different kind of bumps in the pinball. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It really resonates. That makes super sense. Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. And
that you can also, if one is not producing art in that sense, one can also look at project like that. You can, if you are in a situation where you talk with people during a process of developing works, one can use this as a sort of a reminder on just like on following where the trouble is a little bit, It's like you can ask, and then it's important to bring these kind of thinking in early in the process, because if it goes too long, then the only thing you can do is to criticize it and to say like, wait a minute, the maintenance is not working. So if it's not, then it was just a waste of time to do the project, because if it's not working, then, but if it would have been brought in earlier in the process, then the problem would have been an asset instead and would have been part of creating the work, in that sense.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And here, and then what we talk around here is this, when inside OPI then, or of public interest, we talk around these different words a lot: distribution, feedback loops, open door session. Some of them are formats, some of them are sort of ways or methodologies to work. Some of them are connected to more like what I think it's like ways to work today when our public space is quite difficult to navigate, or our spaces in general are difficult to navigate. It's less and less polyphony of voices going on in the public space, and more that you need to agree on, or people project get stopped, and so on. More and more around the world, and more also up in the Nordics where we are, where politics are now changing. Feedback loops is distribution. We mean like how a work is distributed, how a work, which kind of forms it take, which kind of publics, who you're speaking with, why you're speaking with them, and bring that into quite early also. As if you're an artist, you are sort of trained from the beginning in an environment in art schools where it's so built on that you are in a white cube and you are doing art for exhibition making. So it means that you're not trained to think about the viewer as the public as publics. you're trained in sort of developing your artistic language, and that doesn't relate so much to an actual different people. And how you distribute it is very often towards an area where people go to these places to actually see what you do. If you work outside an institutional setting, the superpowers with that is that none of the people are maybe there for what you are doing. And that you can use. That's like really the strengths of working outside a public space. I think that opposite of that, because suddenly it's like everything what someone sees, it kind of is what it is. If they see a pissoir, it's not an artwork like Duchamp's pissoir it's a pissoir. If they see a person standing on the street and singing, it's a crazy person standing on the street. If you see the same person inside a gallery, it's a performance, So it's something which one can then work with, which are connected to many, which is the superpowers of working in outside an institutional setting, that you get the reading from the beginning where it is what it is, if that makes sense. Feedback loops is something we do inside the lab then in the core setting, in the educational setting, where we try to go out and sketch in our public space with very fast during a week. We go out and prototype and do scale 1-to-1 tests. So we try to do and use our which means that we very early on go out and during a week we try to formulate some kind of thing where we want to have feedback on. That could be like a scale, it could be a color, it could be politics of a work, it could be, can we make someone stop here? It could be whatever it is, but something you want feedback on. It could be a function. Can I make someone sit here, or can I create a group here, or can I, And then during a week, then you will be able to formulate that, get feedback on it, to see if it works or not, think through critically if what works, and then maybe take it to the next level, which means that it's like, so what would you change? So all this inside a week, to do it very, very fast and in very sketch method, almost like how methods that they work in theater with. Open door sessions, we open our doors in our studio where I sit now, one time every months then, when we meet in the lab setting with the educational setting, and we then show people what we do, and we invite them for some food and so on, but we do it through artistic language. The same with feedback loop. We speak with our language. We don't try to kind of create a community center where we then aim to speak with a community in other language than our own. So we try to use artistic language all the time, insist on doing that. And then we of course use conviviality as a way of being able to gather around that. But we camouflaging practice, one can say the camouflaging practice, double ontology, spatial double agents, and counter spaces, all of them are kind of different alternation of the same thing, where I believe very much in in days like this, when we work and that it's more and more complex in working with methodologies that let's say where art is just where, if I make an artwork and it's a critical artwork and all it is an artwork, it can be very hard to negotiate it in today. That one can think is wrong. One can think it shouldn't. And that we have a group of people, and should exist a group of people that try to work for it should be possible to do that. My approach or OPI is more to look at, okay, so this is how the landscape is now. It's complicated. So how do we do to negotiate in these kind of things in the world where it looks like this? So it means that one can work with Trojan horses, one can work with double ontologies, which means that if we work in multidisciplinary setting and we work together, an artist, an architect, and some other people, a culture producer and so on, it means that a house can be something more than a house. It can function as a house, but it can have double layers. It can have a meaning for an architect where they say, I did this house, And the same house can also have a meaning for an artist when they said, I did this house. But they exist with different values in two different worlds, one can say. I can jump to two examples here to talk, which are both talking around sort of double ontology or these kind of camouflaging practice from very different kind of perspectives, one can say. Oslo Opera House. Opera House is one of the most, without saying if that is a good building or not, it's quite clumsy if one would say something about the architecture, but if one allow oneself to think beyond if one like the building or not. But then one can think like this, okay, so an opera house is something which concerns very, very few people. It's a super few people that are interested in opera. It's an extremely expensive art form to produce. It takes long. They work for productions for many, many years, and then it's like they do 6, 7, 8 performances for a few group of people, and they very often have central houses in the cities around the world where the opera houses are placed. So what they succeed with in this one is to make the most sort of private or most very, very little, or a place which has not of interest for so many, to become like a huge public square. So that is interesting in itself, that it has this sort of double ontology. It means two different things for different people. Most people that go there don't really care about the opera. They go there to go down to the square by the water, to walk around there and so on, Then I have an old work by Michael Rakowitz, which are using the ventilation. It's done in Los Angeles, and it's using the ventilation from houses, where it comes out this warm air to create shelters for homeless peoples. So there you see one of these shelters from 1989, where it's also means completely, it's still part of his practice. It's an artwork in that sense, but it's also something very different for it's architecture, it's a shelter, it means very different things for the different people that are around, and they don't, the same as with opera, and the same as what I mean with these other, you don't need to know that it functions in another way, in another world. It's not important if these are functioning in those way, or how they function in different worlds. Sorry, I become a little bit not so clear here. Any questions, Niels? There, I use you a little bit as a discussion partner. Anything unclear?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this idea of double ontology is actually quite interesting, isn't it? Because it also changes the conversation around both the buildings that we design for our cities, but also the interaction. The example of Oslo, I think, is brilliant, because it is so clear that the demand for that particular building extended the limited few audiences for the interior activities, and they wanted to create something that placed it in the heart of the city as a public interaction. And I think that kind of double ontology is quite clear from the point of architecture. But I think the other example is actually a more interesting example, because that's about artistic activism, making art also as an activist point of interaction that is there with a purpose, with a double purpose, but also with a question mark in a way. So do you see? Can you just elaborate about how are these spaces of intervention, of double ontological intervention, actually being received? How are they being perceived? How do people react on Michael Rakowitz's work in Los Angeles?
Yeah, but it's like, I think what is interesting for me is this way of also what I can, when I'm trained from the beginning as an architect. I went into art, and for me it has never been so important on how people read what I do. If they place it as art or architecture and so on, it's like, it is what it is what, you know, that's why I'm so occupied with this outside the institute. It is what it is. But of course, what it is different for different people. Our public spaces today are safe for me when I go out in them, because I'm a white dude, which is middle-aged and tall and so on. So I can go out anywhere and I feel sort of safe. If you're a woman, it's not. If you're of color, it's not. If you can just, like, you know, so spaces are always different from, so they always have these ontologies, but we choose to not kind of work with them. And which means that, of course, if you, as an artist, start to think like that and start to use that power of working outside, because inside the art space, you can't. It's always art. Whatever you do, even, you know, we that are in this space here and in this round table now, that maybe knows quite much about art and so on. And even when we go into museums today, we sometimes got confused if the light switch is a part of an installation. Is it an art? You know, it's like, no, it's just a light switch. But that space is so strong in its ontology, in its meaning creating, so it never becomes anything else than art, which means that if you do politics inside that space, it never becomes real politics. It's just art. And it's like art which are using politics as a color in their palette. Outside an institutional setting, it still have the potential of actually being all these different things for different people. The same work can be, Michael Rakowitz work can be a super important, you know, if he did, you know, he did them, he didn't have a commission to do them, he just did them, which means that if he would have had more money and would have spread those around the whole Los Angeles, it would have been an important discussion around and it's huge. It was big already 89 with the homelessness or homeless population in Los Angeles. But it's like, that would have created like a architectural debate, a city planning debate, you know, it could have been real politics from it. At the same time, if you would walk by there as an artist or as an you will probably read it as well as art, I would say. And the homeless people don't give a shit about any, or maybe they do, but they don't, because their first maybe way of reading it is that there's a space where they can sleep during the night and it's some heat, you know. So of course you have all these different layers, and if one can start to work with that, when one start to work with, you know, if one go into a multidisciplinary work methodology then, and start to work with different disciplines, and then you allow yourself, you don't think now we should merge, so I become like a half bad architect, the architect become a half bad artist, and we try to do something together, which is, you know. But if we allow ourselves to instead think, no, we should keep all our ontologies here. The architecture, we can solve the task of what the architecture could solve, but we can add layers to that. We can start to tell other kind of stories, you know. And that's where the camouflage or the Trojan horse come in, where depending on who sees it, so maybe the city planners that are looking at it, or the municipality that are seeing it, they just see that, okay, we asked for 100 apartments, here we have 100 apartments, and it's the building as tall as it should be, the materialities looks like it should be, you know, so they are happy with what they see. But then it's a potential, of course, to add other stories to that, to add other layers, which other people will read and see as well, you know. So of course we should use this. A city is always full of these layers, but we can be much better in using those potential with adding layers into our built environment in that sense, if we work with this ontological way of or thinking of them as spatial double agents or counter spaces, whatever we put into whatever position we have in relation to the area we walk into, then we maybe use a different word for that.
I would just thank you very much for that last comment. I would just give you 5 minutes kind of to wrap up your points and then go on to Lala.
Yeah. So then I will just show a few images in the end here so you can see a little bit about our space, how that works, and a little bit of how we try to work as much as possible outdoors when we do it, to be outdoors, because when you are outdoors, one of the best negotiation things you can do if you want to make art, which is difficult or maybe not what citizens wants to do, is to be out and actually building it, because then, or doing it in groups, because then the people that lives in the neighborhoods start to ask questions, and they become part of what you do. Even if they in the end don't like what you do, they become part of the dialogue of creating what you do, because we are out there sketching before we even know what to do ourselves, in that sense. So it means that you need to formulate the language together with someone, and then they feel part of the work. So we almost never get complaints of the work, even though people quite often don't understand what we do and why. And that is for me, it's maybe the goal with this also. The goal is not to do art or do architecture and do what people want to have. The goal is to be able to do things and be allowed to do things what they don't want in that. To be a strong voice in public space, one of the voices, but that the art can get a voice which is then strong in itself, like without needing to kind of please everyone in that sense. So maybe I can stop with that, because that is for me one of the most important, what I think is important differences when people read in that we are sort of a community based or placed and so on, that they always read in that we are looking to kind of do things for the neighborhood. And I'm not sure it's the case, even though I believe that if it's a neighborhood which have very many different voices, I believe that is to do something for the neighborhood, Okay.
Thank you very much for that one. And I think I will allow that question that I have on my lips just to hang there a bit more, because I think you can reflect on that, all you who are with us, on what does that really mean, that it's not just for, but it might actually be for the neighborhood, doing something for the neighborhood. Because I think that question is super interesting. Who are we doing it for? Why are we actually doing it? What's the intention that we want to create with our public interactions, or being part of a public development or a public process? You just want to comment something, Jonas?
Yeah, just to add to that, just to say that it's so, of course, because of that, it's so complex to know what is doing good is. Very often the things we think is when we do good is not ending up good. And very often if we do something which not strive for being good or political at all, it can end up with being extremely political and actually do things. So therefore it's very bad starting point in having that aim or that mission. It's better to have another mission and then trust what artistic language can do in that sense, or what that kind of intervention can do, and see where it takes you.
Fantastic. That's a wonderful double colon actually to you, Lala, because that might give you just a lot of things to reflect on and tap your own presentation to. But I would very much like to go to you and introduce you also very short to your colleagues. I'm not sure everybody knows you in that sense. As I said in my presentation, that Lala is an experienced urban anthropologist, has worked with community development, public space interventions, research, has been part of a process about community-driven approaches that actually kind of stimulated political changes in the creation of a public park in Cluj in Romania. And she's also kind of authoring a valuable case study in transforming contested urban spaces through cultural facilitation. So here we have another kind of interaction in your professional way of working. So Lala, please, the screen is yours. I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you, Niels. Do you hear me well? Okay.
Yes.
You already said a lot of great things about, and you summarized very well our work. And indeed, Jonas' presentation gave me a lot of food for thought, and also for future reflections in my future researches. I think through my presentation, I already will explain to all of you my personal research and my common work that I was part of. I was not the only one in all that I will present, of course. This is common work, the public space. It's a common element, of course. And I think also to Oana, that gave me this very special occasion to do again a reflection of my work, because I was interested in studying the public space and art interventions after '89, after the revolution, until 2012 for my PhD. And then after researching the Romanian public space, I started also certain scholarships to have comparative case studies, mostly with Berlin, with Germany. And after that, I almost forgot that I followed all these research and actors, and I started to have more work on hands-on. So this hands-on, okay, all these inspirations that I will talk about were nice. But how can we contribute to our public space in Romania that was also lacking still good examples and practices? So I will offer you. I will try to be short and also leave space for future questions or comments from the participants, and I will. Share my screen. Let's see if it works.
But still take your time. We have time.
Yeah. Okay, I will share my presentation. Do you see it?
Yes, we do. It's
okay.
So just go to presenter mode.
Also, after our preparation of the last days together, I still have 3 processes and elements which are also in my mind all the time. I always redefine what is a cultural and artistic intervention in Romanian public space, then how it drives community engagement could be different, could be complementary, and always the protests that come in. And lately in Romania, in Romanian context, as most of the participants are Romanian, I think there are more protests than cultural or artistic interventions in public space. And I will try to see also why. So my first inspirational background, as I named, was in 2006 when I started a Bauhaus scholarship at Bauhaus College in Dessau, and there I met also the urban pioneers of Tempelhof, the famous Tempelhof of Berlin. And the many initiatives and the very diverse initiatives that I worked with and I got to know also brought an inspiration of this freedom of exploring and retransforming public space as we wish and as we dream. A thing that in Romania wasn't so much possible in the 2000s, but we will see later. So these kind of spaces and shapes and architectural ephemeral interventions always triggered me to understand more also the social memory of the space, the participation, how you start participating in public spaces, how the citizens engage. These were things in the 2000s in Romania that were not so popular in Romanian public space. We have a background, I will explain you after that, after the '89 revolution, we had to build our freedom in the public space bit by bit. And sometimes it's not always an evolution of this building and rebuilding this freedom. It's also coming with ups and downs. And one of the first artists that I was analyzing in Romanian public space, it's even earlier than 2000s, it's 90s, in fact, very subversive groups from Cluj. They were calling themselves Mindbomb. There was a secret group. Of course, in the local smaller circles of Cluj, we knew them. They were architects, artists, quite courageous, tactical artists, I would call them. And they started with simple poster arts, bombing the city. When we used to have in Cluj a very nationalistic mayor, Funar. Oh, what times were then? And they really exposed their critics, not only upon the local elections, also about war. You see a poster which is also today very, very valid. Also about this ecological, very strong cause that we had, the Roșia Montana, the Gold Corporation issue. They're very specific, but for the Romanian context, I think they're very strong points in the activist history, which also influenced a lot of artists in their statement as a generation. So the 60s, no, 70s, 80s born artists were producing this kind of art. And it was a development of the civil society also. In 2000s, I must say the civil society of Romania started to develop more and more. Funding finally started to came in. Also in 2007, we had the EU integration. And also we had funds from the Ministry of Culture, EU funding. So also together with the funding, I think the development of artistic practices in public space started to be more powerful. And I just picked up some relevant performances, constructions, statements in public space that I considered for me iconic. Maybe there are tons of others, but I just picked these. In the left, it's a project called Bucharest 2007, which was really marking a point in the development of art in public space. Romanian artists and also Romanian-based, Romanian and Berlin-based artists were engaging in quite strong statements. In the left, it was a performance of two artists, Dan Perjovski and Mihai Mihalcea, a choreographer and an artistic graffitian artist, which were referring to the first protest after 90s, the Mineriad. I don't know how to call them in English. We were having other episodes apart from the Romanian Revolution, also very violent one. And this was a very strong statement that they had in the very center space of democracy, the Piața Universității. In the corner of the right down, it's also a project of Daniel Knorr, which was part of that project. He has taken some trams in Bucharest and painted them only having the names of the biggest and controversial institutions that we had. He picked up the army, the police, the Orthodox Church, and these trams were circulating all of the cities. Somehow it's like the army is with you, the church is with you, but in fact these institutions were not representing the citizens. This was also strong. And others were like in Timișoara 2023, when the Timișoara had the title of European Capital of Culture. Some community artists from Traian decided to transform a square into a football square, in fact. And it was more pleasing for the communities around, which already had teams of playing footballs against each other. So it was a very innovative practice from my point of view. Instead of constructing installations or other type of performances like other artists already created in the cultural capital, they just put their efforts together, also with the architects funding, just to build up this terrain, which in fact was also expensive to maintain. overlapping the pavement, the initial pavement of a historical square. But this brought a lot of joy and participation to the inhabitants, not to the regular artist public. And the rest of them also influenced our work in the community space that I will describe later. Studio Bazar and Comunitas associations, both of anthropologists, artists, architects, so more on the research and community engagement that brought temporary architecture into community use. So how architecture can be built in order for the people to participate and to be gathered around discussions, neighborhood talks, participation, so not so much on aesthetics. And you will see I focus more on politics than aesthetics, community engagement than aesthetics. So somehow I think from my point of view, the statement art in our space doesn't touch all the time the aesthetics. It has more profound meaning and less sexier appeal, as some would say. So these participatory examples that we have in the screen are bringing people together, building civic initiatives around the lake, around the area, in neighborhoods, in Bucharest, in Cluj. So somehow around the needs of the citizens and communities, architects, anthropologists, and usually urban actors, I call them, gather and just act like this in a temporary way, just to provoke or to raise awareness or to gather signatures for petitions or to move on or to present plans to the town hall. All of these that I presented are having a parallel layer, in fact, two parallel layers. I mentioned before the funding element. The funding also grew up, but in fact, one institution maintained the funding in Romania concerning also installations in public space and interventions. It's this AFCN, mostly for independent artists and for associations. It's financed by the Ministry of Culture. The other cities or other municipalities, except Timișoara, that was the title, don't accept this type of intervention, don't understand the way intervention function. And of course, if you are an artist or an association that want to apply to funds, you have to squeeze in always to other strategies, other directions of funding, which also is killing your idea most of the times. And this interdisciplinarity and pluridisciplinarity that Jonas mentioned also, it's a way that changes always in public space. I mean, you have a vision of a project, you were starting it, but always the reality of the terrain and of the public space and of the social context that you gather there, it's very different. So you have to change your project. So few financement institutions are really encouraging this changing of the budget. And that's very technical, but lately in the last years, I'm working more on this side of facilitating funding for the artists. And also parallel with this funding, which is not constant and it's quite rare compared to the amount of ideas on public space, it's also that we lack a law of public space. We have a single law applied in 1901, the law of public gatherings, which a lot of protests are connecting themselves or organizing protests on this law. But in fact, this law doesn't have anything to do with cultural appropriation of public space, cultural interventions, and so on. So imagine mostly all of these artists that I'm showing in this picture struggle a lot to obtain permit, not to have their events cancelled. Some of them got to temporary arrest for this. So somehow it's not easy just to have an idea and to jump into the public space without having fines or bans from municipality. So from my point of view, these people are very courageous in all these tactics and strategies on public space, and you really have to have courage to accomplish this until the end, with approval, with managing the projects, with the funding, of course, and with, of course, the feedback of the communities and the citizens around. And sometimes it's a circle, sometimes it's a spiral in our history of public space in Romania. And of course, we end up constantly in this level of protests. And I think in the last year, as also in your countries, it's getting more intense, and our realities are changing from one month to another on a political level. I think this aspect I had to introduce because when I was interviewing and analyzing the artists in public space, they were also preparing protests in parallel. They were always having creative banners in the regular protests, so they were also engaging in the activism. Somehow, if you care about public space and the political message of your work, you also engage in activism. It's not obligatory, but most of the artists that I analyzed and I work with engage also in monumental protests that you saw. We had restarted them since 2012. So they are milestones of protesters, more and more. In the last years, certain lethargy started to occur, but also the political subjects that we have lately on our agenda, I think, raise more protesters again. So somehow it's ups and downs. It's interesting, but sometimes I feel like because in our public space, it wasn't enough work on prevention, but always on reaction, also from the artists. Not working on prevention means it's not always a fair evolution of art in public space. So it's always reaction, it's always inflation. You don't have time for vision or for strategy. There is a lack between the state and the citizens, the state and the artists. Nowadays also the Ministry of Culture holds a petition for his resignations and so on. So somehow it's exciting, as in your realities also, to live in the public space and the public sphere, as Jonas said. But somehow it doesn't give us time to breathe and also to analyze more what we've done in the public space. What is public space to its citizens? It's always this alarm times, in which you don't think too much. You jump into the street because there is always something to save, some tree in the public space or some other abuse of the authorities. This was a very, very not so short introduction of our context, also for our foreigner guests. And in between this, we started our project in La Terenuri as an effect also of more or less Roșia Montană protests from 2012, because we started a European fund in 2012. It was about the activation of abandoned places in the neighborhoods. And we chose the most famous apparently abandoned space in the biggest neighborhood of Cluj. I show you also the broad picture to understand. It's the biggest neighborhood of the city. It has mostly 100,000 inhabitants. It has a big green area, which was somehow left on the way in the communist planning part. It was initially planned as a park, but then they didn't have budget for this, and then they left it like this, and it's surrounded by a huge forest. I think in 2026 it has more cut parts, unfortunately, and they planned also a big highway to cross it. That's another issue. And speaking about methodology, sorry, it's in Romania. We have this, but we we didn't focus only on the green area. We always focus on the schools in the neighborhood. We focused on a former cinema, which was transformed into a community center. And we were basically all the way in the streets of the neighborhood, always consulting people, researching, working a lot on hands-on construction, then again research, co-design. Of course, for the people to come to this area to share their wishes also for this, and also to get contact also with our ideas on the space, because as Jonas said, when you ask people what they want, maybe it's not always that you want or not what they want, but they don't know how to express all the time their vision on the space. So we gathered opinions through a lot of participative process and methodologies. And after gathering all these ideas, we started to, every year, within 7 years, we started to propose and construct ways of seeing a new space. So we started to simulate to the town hall this abandoned space in many ways, in many scenarios. In the end, you will see they picked up a scenario and they built the park, but we didn't think that this will be a success. We just continued the pressure for 7 years, knowing that maybe they will hear us. So in the picture of the first picture up was the abandoned area in the first year, the first spring of 2013. And we were also proposing workshops called Learning from Mănăștur. It was also learning from Los Angeles and other cities pattern. So sometimes we had to say learning from a disaster, which was a small disaster leaving the area like this, but in our way was a good point and a good starting point to innovate. And we just simulated the wishes we had for this space. So we brought architects, student of architecture to build, and of course we always reused materials from the garbage dump of the city. We're always recycled. You see tires here. We played a lot with materials. We built a stage for the local culture to appear. We put containers. We brought a big stage for the Days of the Neighborhood, in which we also curated a combination of local hip hop, local traditional music, master plan debate. So we made a eclectic combination in which the people had manifested interest in our space, because firstly they didn't know what we are, who we are, why we want to work there. We worked also in a school on mural art with the local artists, also working more on inclusion with the pupils. Also, we made a lot of consultation in the street. We just printed the map of the area, and we designed alternative furniture models with the kids in the area, and then we presented to the elders. So what kind of swings, what kind of playgrounds do they want there? We also worked with international architects and artists. This group was Mora da Vaga, together with my architect colleague Silviu Medeșan, who also coordinated architecture component. And they designed chairable, so between a chair and a table, and they played around in all the neighborhood with the student of architecture. So it supported poster of the events, consultations with the elders, playing in the field. So we like to improvise a lot, and also with small budgets, as always. Also, we organized talks and consultations for this Dacia Center. We attracted also a scholarship from the Bosch Foundation, Actors of Urban Change. So we were part of a huge network which offered us a lot of knowledge and support, especially on similar projects like ours. We made, again, consultations with the locals. What do you think? How we improved your life? Do you want to engage more? We also attracted a number of mostly 10 individuals that formed an initiative, more local group than ours. So somehow we delegated the power to the local inhabitants, and in the end we left them alone there to manage their area. We made publications, newspaper of neighborhood, also theoretical approach. So we dealt with a lot of audiences, from theoreticians to citizens. We had to express in many languages. We created small interventions in our last years to bridge areas that were not connected. And also, you gave me also an idea, Jonas gave me mostly, after his cancellation of his memorial. I also realized we many times were, we had a lot of obstacles in our work. We were also invited in a TEDx talk about the Dare to Fail. This was a long time ago. And somehow I collected articles about some interventions we proposed in the city, also in our neighborhood. And somehow we always adapted and made it possible the way it was possible. But yeah, many times it was difficult to have this apparent freedom of playing in the public space, but was always backed by a lot of bureaucracy and many doors closed in the town hall, and pressure and burnout. But that's also included in community work most of the times. And after the pandemics or during the pandemics, before the pandemics, they finally announced that they took into the consideration our demands to transform this area into a public park, and they launched the licitation and contest and so on. And let's see, I can. Do you see also the page I open? Okay, this is now in the hands of the town hall, and it's called Baza Sportivă la Terenuri. They shifted it more into a sport base. It is what it is. I mean, we took our hands off this project. It was pressure. They constructed it as the community wanted, also adding more sports, but also continuing levels of participation and culture. They build an amphitheater, they build running areas, one second, skateboard, they have a gallery, this is it. And during the night, they have also an indoor space where I saw people doing yoga and all sorts of ping pong, and somehow it was not what we demanded. We put more innovation and interdisciplinarity in approaching the neighborhood, but this is it. I mean, public investment, it's one way, and they have to maintain it one way, not as we maintained it in interdisciplinary. So somehow this is what. One second. So this was in short, and this is a small message left by some kids in the neighborhood saying that we love you. And this is sometimes a subtle way the community thanking you. And it's not about thanking, it's about a common wish for spaces to be better, I think, for the citizens and also for the future, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Fantastic. And it raises immediately a whole series of questions with me. One, of course, being, what do you think is the main driver for the end result here when it comes to the policymakers? What were they hoping for, and what do you see as the challenges going ahead in doing similar projects? What is needed in a way to create more of that kind of interdisciplinary interactions and interventions that you work with?
Only for me is the question?
It's actually for Jonas as well, but I think the difference between Sweden and Romania also has to be taken into consideration.
Yes.
So if you just answer within the framework of Romania.
I think we tried and we succeeded a few times to expose our politicians to the Western tendencies, let's call it. We even brought the mayor of Cluj to Berlin, to other spaces. Some of my colleagues constantly exposed him, and not only us exposed him, he also went himself to Western countries and saw how public spaces are. But somehow it took them quite long to transform them as we wish, and it took them too long to transform them in a participative way that we did with La Terenuri. The rest of the spaces in the city, the river of the city also has some participative processes behind, Somes River, but most of the spaces that they designed are really top-down. They never listened so much the citizens. They didn't take into the consideration the grassroots level, you know, as in our case also on their site, it appears that the town hall made this park. It doesn't say anything about our work. We don't care, everybody knows. So somehow it's they are not attentive enough to these civic needs, and it's this rupture between the citizen and the authorities, and in the middle is the trust, as I know it, and trust in financement, trust in action. I think trust in dialogue. There is not always dialogue, and I think in many cities of our countries, it's still this status of lack of trust between them. It's always, we have the impression of warriors, you know, they are the warriors, and then it's vice versa. So exposure, I think, and also if we talk about this trust, they will understand that we don't want we are not the enemy of nobody, you know, we always wanted the common good for the public citizens and so on. But somehow I didn't see this trust, and maybe other projects in the future will try to connect these areas.
I think from my personal perspective, in working in the Nordics and working in Denmark, I think trust is actually quite interesting. To trust the process, to trust the outcome of the intervention, to trust that it might not be a success in a commercial framework or as in a specific political understanding of it, but it might fail forward, that it might actually has its own logic that in a way creates a completely new place. And that could turn me to you, Jonas. That is, how do you see it from a Swedish perspective? Do you think there is a resonance for that way of working that you and OPLab has, that you work differently, and OPX, that you try to create some kind of distraction, disturbance, be that other push force that actually can change the perception of things? Is that understood really by, you know, the city planners or the local planners or the political framework?
We have I was reading one of the questions in the comments when you asked your first question, so I don't know what the question is from the beginning, but I will try to decode it through what Laura said and what you said now. But it's like, I think what we are doing in terms of how we work with going out and sketching and maybe questioning and insisting of putting in alternative agendas or alternative sort of meanings and readings and pushing for different things. I think the city planners or the local community here start to make some sense of it, in that sense, that it's I don't know if we had the, you know, we have this big industrial area here. We had the main actor from that detail plan came to us the other day. You know, we had one of the biggest owners of that land, which is Skanska, this big building company, and they were here angry on us because someone had done a something in the wind, it's like we are in a basement, a group of people have no resources at all, and they were still, their boss have got to know at Skanska that, so some kind of meaning do we create here. I think maybe that the biggest meaning is sometimes it's just that you raise. I rarely think that we can change something which is going on now in this area we are working on now, but I think that we can change things in other areas will go to happen or coming to happen later, because I think what we do is to introduce ideas around this, to talk with the communities around these things. It's like to talk with to kind of gather people and talk around it, and then we lift these subjects up to a certain kind of awareness that is very seldom discussed in either newspapers. I never talk city planning in newspapers in Sweden or in, I think not so much in Nordic countries. It happens, it goes slowly, it comes when we come in, when the citizens come in and the changes in the neighborhood come in, it's almost always too late. The process have been on for 10 years earlier, and then we come in when the things start to become public, and so that is really, so you need to talk, your strategy should rather be to talk with the next, the one that happens in 10 years, which is a very hard thing to do as a citizen, but I don't think, I'm not sure I answered anything.
Absolutely, you did. I mean, because that's where we are, isn't it? It's in a way, it's quite a mute. We can't really pretend that we understand what's going to happen within the next, 2, 3, 4 years. 2 years ago, none of us were talking about AI. Now it's everywhere, So we have this kind of insecurity. We are navigating unknown waters in a way, but we are doing it with intentions and, of course, expertise and learnings and our own aims that in a way should help us to find out how can we explore that field of interaction, or how can we place art as at least a reflectory or a change maker, or provoke some kind of reflection and stirring. We have 2 comments, and I think that is also quite about what we have time for, because we're going over time, aren't we, Oana? Please, Oana, you first, and then Lala.
Actually, it was me, Jonas. I wanted to ask you a question, but of course it's an open question for anybody who would dare to answer. We talk a lot about ownership of the public space. I mean, the public space belongs to everybody, to all of us. How do you take ownership of your own space? But when you talk about public space, which one? I mean, it's the space in your neighborhood, is the space near your job, is the park near where you live, is the museum in the city center? Which is the space that you would need to reclaim or to own or to put your mark on? So yeah, very open question.
Yeah, that is a difficult one, but it's like I try to not talk so much about public space in that sense, because, and first of all, I think we need to talk about publics. We need to talk about many different publics, because it's like this kind of idea of a big public that, then when people come in to join the course here and say, I want to talk with the public, it's like, who is that? It's like, it doesn't make sense. You're always excluding people and so on. We open our doors here for a public, you say open door session, but we can't have open for all public. We have no training in that. Our space suits, 50 people. So it's like, I think one need to decide who do we want to speak with, and what kind of, and why are we doing that? Which means that we dig where we stand here. We try to stay here and talk with this area in a way, and insist on keeping talking, and then we insist on the right for us to speak in public, be one of the publics that goes out and speak, and we speak with artistic languages. So these are what we think is important, and then we believe that if we learn how to listen here, and learn a methodology of a listening practice here, and learn whatever that means, then that methodology and that way of working is applicable in other places. So if you just learn how to do that, then you can go anywhere and start to listen and start a dialogue and go out with your, and we try to speak the art or whatever we do, architecture in that sense, in as a language in itself, and our right to do that. And we go out without permission to do it. And that we can do in Sweden or in Scandinavian context, because I'm not afraid of getting caught by the police or that it's in that sense. But we can still be it, we still do it illegally. So it's I don't know if either that is an answering but it's like, I believe in this dig where you stand, because I don't think we should go. It's so complex to go somewhere else. People can say to me sometimes, because this area is not a problem area. It's now, it's a kind of a functioning neighborhood. It's it has an industrial area. It's getting gentrified like most. It's like, and then now, if you're in Sweden, you should go up north. You should be with the indigenous north and be there. But it's not where we are from. It's people there that are professionals that can work with that, and we can be up and be part of that occasionally, but it's not. We need to dig where we stand and then come with those to learn from the languages. That I truly believe in that. That is the public's or the sort of the living environment that I believe in.
That's a fantastic exclamation mark, really. Thank you very much. Jonas. Lala, please, you have also raised your hand.
I forgot one element in the mapping I have done, an element which is also crucial in our, mostly, let's say, since 10 years ago, our public spaces, but I think yours is similar, got more and more capitalized and privatized in a way. And I think this actor also, the new actor in our case is the festivalization, the appearance of more and more festivals on the public space, or users that started to rent the public space, because I had experiences of also working in a municipality in the last years. I saw also somehow, as I mentioned, the lack of trust between citizen and authority. I saw another relationship between the private sector and the town halls and the authorities. And many times these events, the private events, were also more facilitated to appear and to be to be legal on the public space, coming from the private, which also made me frustrated in time to see also that the artists and associations had to prove much more their capacity and numbers on the public space. And I think one of the success that we had in Mănășturi, in the neighborhood, was that we gathered thousands of people at events. And we realized the town hall wanted numbers. It wasn't fair because we had consultations of tens of people, but also we played this card festivalization, which in the center was full of. The festival started also in those times, in 2015. So somehow it's perverse to think of numbers, but numbers also can convince municipalities in these electoral ways, of course. Depends on which part of the clock you are in the electoral time, in the 4 years, and then you have the advocacy on your part, which is again not fair for the artists that really want to create a sincere intervention or a punctual intervention in the public space. So somehow this private element, and of course the capitalistic society in which we live, it's also not a cause, directly cause, but it's a way in which artists get more and more marginalized. And I think this is an issue that consumes us more and more. And the lack of funding combined with this, I think it gets us more fragile in the public space, I think. But let's see about the future.
Absolutely. No, but I think that's a really important point, because I think one of the challenges that we do face in all of Europe is, in a way, that our whole kind of public administration discourse has taken over a language, a reporting system, a raison d'être from the private sector. So when we started educating civil servants in the 1990s and were further on into the zeros in all over Europe, it was very much about new public management, and numbers matters, because we have constantly to argue, why is this important? How many people benefited from this? Did you really try to access all taxpayers, but using taxpayer money to facilitate interact, that kind of logic. And it's not being taught anymore in the London School of Economics that invented it, exactly because of that, because it creates quite cynical structures that are not designed for artistic intervention, human intervention, social intervention. It's very rarely about tens of thousands of people. It's about sense making in small groups on a human level, on an eye-to-eye level, and that kind of logic that is just about accumulation of masses don't work in reality. It doesn't really work. And now we know that, but unfortunately every civil servant over the age of 30 has been trained into public management this way over the last 30 years. So we will have to, in a way, find ways to kind of capacity build what they already know and tell them it's wrong and find other ways of doing it. Jonas, you just raised your finger. I will just have to ask you to make it short because people are leaving us now and I want to wrap up. We can't hear you, Jonas. You have to activate your...
Maybe that's good. Maybe I should just be quiet, actually. I think wrap it up. I have a comment, but I'm not sure it's going to change your lives this Friday afternoon. So I guess I give it to you, Niels, instead.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jonas. Thank you very much, Laura, for two very, very good presentations. I personally would love to sit down at a table or on the floor somewhere and keep talking, because this is really, really both important but also super interesting. It's been enormously kind of inspiring to listen to the two of you. I'm really glad for your honesty and your sharing and your generosity. So thank you very much. Thank you, Oana, for setting it all up and creating these roundtables and inviting us all to be part of it. And thank you to every one of you who's out there on the screen with your faces or behind a black screen with a name on. Thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. It's been a pleasure. Have a good and lovely, safe Friday out there and a happy weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you. Hello.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
I have a question, a last question, if it's possible.
Oh, you have?
Please.
Yes, thank you. I live in Stockholm, so I am very interested to know you. If you are here in Stockholm, it would be interesting to meet you and maybe discuss a little bit more.
I think Jonas has...
Yes.
Jonas has already said hello.
Okay.
Yeah, I will definitely connect you. No
Thank
issue.
you so much.
Yeah, super. Yeah, definitely. And I will also send one question for registering form for all that want to come up and have an example for our framework, project framework. And I will send it over so that we can gather more information, even if it wasn't gathered here in a live session. So yeah.
Thank you very much. And I really hope you can make it to meet Jonas, Isabella. I think you will enjoy it.
Yeah, I will.
Thank you so much. Very interesting discussion.
Have a nice afternoon.
Enjoy your Friday. Bye-bye.
Thank you for everything. Bye-bye.